In
3,
2, 1. Welcome to Babble Station, and as you guys may notice, medyo iba yung setup natin for today. But we do have a familiar face returning kasi I think 1 year na rin ata tong podcast na.
Oh, yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah. She was part of our very first episode of Babble Station. And now returning for this ep, none other than our Queen Badass architect, Nikki Buensalido.
Hello, thank you for having me again.
Part 2. Grabe, nung first ep, hindi ata ako kasama nun. So I was just listening to your guys' episode. Tapos, it's funny kasi back then, the conversation was about paano ba nabuo yung Buensalido Architects, diba?
Yeah.
Tapos, ang daming nangyari since then. I think one of my favorite highlights naman since that episode 1, mga June. Was it around June?
Yeah, it's about a year.
a
Almost,
year.
no? A year. So,
Yeah.
congratulations. The 1 year mark.
Right. So, ang dami nangyari. We represented WAF. We launched this podcast.
Yeah. Not to mention then, we also rebranded, right?
Right. And I feel like this is one of the most major change that has come to us the past year. It's when we launched Barchan.
Yeah.
Also, you guys passed the board exam.
Oh,
That's something that that's a
Feeling ko
change
parang-
also.
Parang block out na ng memory ko yun,
Oh.
yung entire experience na yun.
So, congratulations
Oh,
for
thank
passing the
you.
board exam. Feeling ko it's really been a year, different seasons. Parang in the other countries, dumaan na si summer, spring, winter, and fall. And then all you have to do is call me again. So I'm happy to be back. And a lot of things have changed, I think, after a whole year. No, yes, we rebranded. We had some exciting projects that we finished. You guys passed the board exam. Lomi passed the board exam. It's a new chapter, I suppose. And our firm had its a birthday. So parang hindi na siya teenager, adult na siya. Nag-18 na siya, nag-debut siya. Parang ganun yung feeling. That's why we rebranded. So thank you again for having me here. It's nice to be back. After a whole year, it's nice to still have our viewers and listeners still engaged with Babble, and we guess must be doing something good, right?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Right, fast forward 2024. I'm seeing this pink book sa harap ko, ma'am. So, Shifting Sands by Barchan Architecture. And a lot of people keep asking me, ano ba yung Barchan?
Yeah.
Barchan is actually a symbolic interpretation of the sand dunes. And it's ever-changing, ever-evolving, especially in the desert when winds come, the tides change. And I think it's also very symbolic that we are at that cross point also, that we're trying to evolve, but we're still the same soul. And I remember in the podcast, we were talking about having that soul, right? That the creative soul, the transition from the head to the heart, and you have to have that kind of passion. I think it's still there. It just evolved into something more mature. And the visions, propositions, and reimaginations are still a product of who we are before, and having more people join us over the course of time. We've also evolved because of the ideas that have been brought to the table, the exchange of concepts, the exchange of design thinking, I think made the firm more mature, and that's what that book is about. Also, people have been asking me if sira yung cover, no? When they open it, parang sira yung in-order naming libro. But I think it's really like that. The firm that did the layouts, they're also very known for creative thinking and reimaginative thinking. So that's why we also partner with them. So hindi sira yung book if you get it and you open it that way.
Cool story kasi the first time na narinig ko din about Buensalido, I was still a student at the second year. It was when you launched yung first book, yung Random Responses. It was the same pink book, mas maliit. Tapos dun ko talaga parang, that's where I learned about the values. Parang it got me through 3 years of design. Kasi hindi ko alam kung narinig ni Sir Jason, pero medyo kinopy ko lang naman yung ibang mga nakasulat na concepts. Tapos it got me through college. And I feel like this new book can be that same thing for the next generation then.
The first book actually was envisioned when we were conceptualizing it. It was supposed to be a bathroom book. Wala pang, I guess hindi pa uso yung scrolling through IG threads. So usually when you're in the bathroom, you read a book, right? So we wanted it to be small enough and interesting enough to engage you while you're in the bathroom. But I think with the current book we have now, it's not for the bathroom anymore. And it's really evolved just with how the two books look. We have the same branding company that helped us with it, but you also see how much we've grown over time and how much we've evolved. And the next generation, I don't naman see it as the next generation. Parang feeling ko tanda ko naman. Parang hindi, no? But younger ones can probably take in more because the first book was really... There were some projects that were completed, but a lot of it, if you would notice, are more on the renderings, ideas. The second book is really more those ideas have been fulfilled already. So there's a continuation on that part also na hindi lang puro drawing, literally and figuratively, but it's also a culmination of what we really aspired to be 10 years after, 10 years later. Parang it's a random response given that the sands have shifted over time. If you want to put it that way, it's a continuation of that. It's still different responses to different contexts of projects. But it also has evolved to the times. After the pandemic, I mean, that has made a big impact on how people see houses or see spaces. So it's probably a second thesis after 10 years of how we see the firm and how we want to carry the firm again in the next 10 years, 5 to 10 years.
Since we have the book, like we can like check what's inside the book. And also I'm curious then.
Yeah, so this is the part that is
Na hindi sira.
Hindi lang siya sira.
Yeah. Who was behind the design or concept of the book?
With the rebranding, we also wanted to show that Buensalido Architects has transformed into a collective. So now we're a collective of young architects who aspire for the same mission, still to be a spark plug of change, of positive change into the community. And we also like working with people who are like-minded. So we thought of bringing in this amazing fellow who has designed the first book also and brought him in again to rebrand Barchan and to work with us on the book also. I think you're going to have you'll have a lot of meaningful conversations with him, and I really encourage the listeners, the viewers, people who are joining us for Babble to really pay attention because his word is actually very, very wise. He's a lot of wisdom that he can share to everybody. And I'm excited for you to meet him.
Right. So for this special edition of B+Abble Station, we actually brought on this amazing person, and he's gonna have a one-on-one dialogue with none other than the Chief B+Adass himself.
Finally, after 1 year.
After 1 year, andito na siya, Architect Jason Buensalido.
Today is going to be an amazing conversation because I have known this person for a very long time. Of course, the brilliant Jason Buensalido and the team behind Barchan and Buensalido Plus Architects. It started so many years ago, and for one reason or another, our paths keep on intersecting. Whether it's a conversation about design, a conversation about culture, a conversation about coping with the ever-shifting world, it's always very interesting to have an exchange with somebody whose worldview is also very expanded. And today we're going to be talking to Jason Buensalido, the principal and chief ambassador of Barchan Architecture, which we recently rebranded from Buensalido Plus Architect. And we will do a deep dive into what went into this and what are still the things that we need to do moving forward. So, Jason?
Thanks, Rick. I'd like to throw you back the same favor by doing a short introduction also of how I got to know Rick. Rick, I've known him since I think 06 or 07. So it's been more than a decade of conversations and conversations we've had about anything and everything from our creative frustrations to our dreams and hopes and ideals for the future. even to a point of sometimes introspection. We would throw and bounce ideas off each other. And Rick, I've considered as one of my mentors, actually, and somebody was a few years back challenging me to look for mentors and identify some of the mentors that I've had over the past years. And if you remember that, I approached you and then, Rick, can I formally ask you to be my mentor? And one of the major reasons for me thinking that is because when I first met you, all the way till the first time I met you, I knew automatically that you had both the intellectual rigor and the soul of creativity that is needed to be combined so that we can move forward and stay relevant over a long period of time in the industries that we exist in. So thank you for
Thank you for having me as well.
for being here in Babble Station. I think we're here to not just talk about the rebranding from Buensalido Architects to Barchan, not only just about the book, Shifting Sands, but also, our journey
Yes.
together from the time we met all the way till where we are now.
Yes.
So thanks for being here.
I remember it very clearly.
Yeah.
It's as if it was just like yesterday. It really started when I was editing a magazine called
Yeah.
Memo at the time.
Yeah.
And part of the mission of that publication is to celebrate creativity, but not just creativity. Because if you look maybe a couple of decades ago, it's always the senior superstars that are
Yeah.
hogging all the limelight. So my mandate for Ana Gamboa at the time was to look for the top 40 emerging brilliant designers
Yeah.
that we can sort of spotlight and really look into the way they view the world.
Yeah.
And in that list, the number one name was your name. So I was curious, who is Jason Buensalido? I haven't heard of him because like what we have established earlier, it's always the big marquee names of architecture that's we always get to see and read about.
This was in 2007, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I told Ana, why before we commit to a feature story, why don't we sit down with him for 15 minutes?
Mm-mm.
And the 15 minutes became a 3-hour
Yeah.
conversation.
I remember that very clearly,
Yeah.
actually. It was in Starbucks,
Start
2 blocks from here,
that one.
right? And I remember feeling so intimidated at that time because not only did you intro with that, saying that, oh, somebody gave me a list and then you were top of that list. So when you introed with that, at the back of my mind, I was saying, oh no, what if I say the wrong thing? You might end up being disappointed. Not only that, but I remember you were dressed up, spick and span in a perfect manner. You were even accompanied by a friend of yours who's also a fashion designer who was also equally dressed complete with a necktie and a full-on suit. No different from the way that you're dressed now, no? So I remember that feeling very vividly. I was so intimidated.
So it was very sort of, when you work in a creative industry, you would know or somehow you would have that kind of gut instinct about whether somebody has that kind of spark or creativity that keeps you glued in or interested in. And one of the first thing that you told me many years ago was this mission
right.
that you need to modernize Philippine architecture. And at the back of my head, I did not react to that one easily because I said, okay, that's a tough call.
Yeah.
How are you gonna do it considering that we all know that architecture is an old man's practice.
Yeah.
You devote your younger years creating, getting the footing inside this highly competitive world. And when you have a little bit of success and your name gets known, that's when you can propose your thesis on what you would want to contribute into not only the field, but also your views on how to shift how we look at the world that we live in. So at that time, you were thinking of contemporizing it and fast forward to what you have now. You stuck to your guns.
Yeah.
You stuck to the mission. But do you feel that there are still things that are not checked in the boxes of goals or objectives that you have, considering that early conversations we had?
Yeah, a quick answer to that would be a big yes, right? Because while the mission stays the same, the world changes constantly and evolves constantly. So the mission keeps on growing. The boxes keeps on adding up as well. And so that's actually one of the reasons why we went through this whole rebranding with a new identity, because it's a signal and a recognition that while the soul of the office, of the firm, of the collective remains the same, we also recognize that we also need to adapt to the ever-changing world. But going back to that mission, I think it really started out of frustration. When I was in college, I kind of realized that the built environment that we were existing in at that time didn't really reflect a lot of our culture, our identity as Filipinos, who we were, who we are in our architecture. And then isn't it so that we shape our built environment, but in turn, it'll shape us. So if the way that we are being shaped is devoid of our specificity as Filipinos, we said that, it's only going to be a matter of time before who we are, who we were, will be erased. So it was out of frustration. So I remember college, when there was a competition to join the master plan of the Nayong Pilipino, and I'm sure you have been to, if not at least, the very least, remember what Nayong Pilipino is. There was a competition, it was a national competition amongst architectural students. I automatically joined. It was a no-brainer. So we joined. We won UST. We represented our school, and then we won the national competition. And really, the messages of the design that we proposed at that time really came from the heart, the frustration that I saw, that I had because of the built environment. And then because we won, I said, maybe I have something to say. Maybe I have something to contribute. Because the judges and the multiple rounds that the design went through, maybe somebody heard it, right? And then we won. And so much so that 3 years later, or 4 years later, if I'm not mistaken, 2005, there was another competition now to come up with a master plan for the Cultural Center of the Philippines.
Yes.
That time, my mom sent me an email of a picture of an announcement of the competition from Philippine Star, because Viber was not around, only YM, right? And again, I was very quick in saying that I want to participate. Not really to win. It's never been about winning. But
you did win.
We did win that particular competition. But I said that if we can come up with an idea that the winner or the board of judges will hear and integrate into the final design, then I would have made a significant contribution to kind of shape the country, right? Because it was, after all, the Cultural Center of the Philippines. So we joined. We were one of the underdogs because I didn't have an established firm yet at the time. I didn't have a firm to speak of. But we were up against the big leagues, and then we ended up winning. And then again, I was encouraged that my contribution to the shaping of our culture in the built environment was kind of recognized. And so, I kept on joining nation building related competitions, and we kept on winning. And so that kind of encouraged us to focus all of our efforts on that particular mission. And so that time, when you talked to me in 2007, I was kind of like a horse with blinders, set on achieving or at least pursuing that mission.
I love that you frame it from the idea of frustration, because as we all know, working in creativity, dissatisfaction with the way the world is always the hotbed of innovation, reinvention, or even reframing of what is possible. And
I know that the way that you started DFT was kind of also from frustration. Maybe you can share
because,
a little bit about your origin story. Yeah.
When we meet a potential client and we say we are a branding agency, we had to explain. We had to explain in detail
Yeah.
what branding is all about
Right.
because people are used to advertising, public relations, activation.
Yeah.
But it was unheard of when you say branding, and you always had to justify why this matters.
Yeah.
You know, but now fast forward
Yeah.
to more than a decade, everyone is a branding expert.
Right. Right.
So
yeah.
and it keeps on shifting, like what you
Yeah.
always say. You have somebody who just got out of college, suddenly have that kind of confidence that say,
Mhm.
hey, I'm also a branding expert.
Yeah.
And so how the challenge for both of us is in the same way that architecture is also rapidly evolving,
Yeah.
and it's easy to do a little bit of improving the taste of clients many decades ago because you come from the field of expertise
Mhm.
and training,
Mhm.
but now the democratization of travel make people aware of
Yeah.
what's out there and the demand that level of not just excellence but also it keeps you on your toes to always be not just up to the times
Yeah.
but even ahead of everybody else.
But maybe you can educate us a little bit, Rick, about what branding really is. Like the kind of branding that Design for Tomorrow does, that DFT does. Because a lot of people misconstrue branding as something that's very superficial, that it's too contrived, that it's too commercial, that it is for the purpose of selling.
Yes.
Right? The primary purpose is commercial. When in reality, I know that like an iceberg, what you only see is the top portion of what branding
Yes.
is. But in reality, the depths and the potentialities of branding as an exercise, if you embrace it, can bring you to greater heights, right? So what is branding to you? What kind of branding does DFT does? And what is the particular mission of DFT in relation to branding?
Well, it all started with the name.
Right.
Our name is Designed for Tomorrow. So if you dissect it or tear it apart, there's nothing special about, because these are three generic
Yeah.
words. Design is not ownable.
Right.
Everybody is using design.
Right.
Tomorrow is not ownable. For is just that bridge word between the two. But the combination of the three
Yeah.
gives you a sense of optimism and the idea that if we use design and creative thinking, it can really impact the tomorrow, because you cannot design for the past, you cannot design for the now. You use design to look for ways so that the tomorrow can be a little bit better for everybody.
Yeah.
The purpose of branding is really very simple. Number one, you need to be recognized.
Mhm.
And if you don't believe me,
Mhm.
look at how parents name their children. That is branding.
Yeah.
Because
that's
you
true.
need to be identified from the other children in the hospital.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What if baby 1A, baby 1B, it's just numbers.
Yeah.
You know, this is not yet a dystopian kind of world where you're just having your number to be identified.
Right.
You need, and even the naming is a lot of anguish for people growing up, because if your parents pick the wrong name,
Yeah.
you'll be forever stuck with it.
Yeah. You know
Right?
that old saying, what's in a name?
Yes, it filters into everything that we do. Branding, like from politics to, I mean, even people are branding. Look at
Yeah.
Martha Stewart. Look
Right.
at Trump.
Yeah.
Look at Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Look at Tyra Banks, for example. These are personal brands that became also something that we widely recognize. So what we do in branding is anything. It could be design, it could be strategy, it could be storytelling,
Yeah.
it could be any elements of differentiation for you, number one, to be recognized. And crucially, when that recognition is already very established with the likes of Apple or Nike, where they even drop the name, but you would recognize it a mile away, whichever city you are in the world.
Yeah.
And people should associate that particular icon or a logo or whatever, a claim or a promise, like, for example, you're in good hands.
Yeah.
We've got it all for you.
Yeah.
So it becomes associated
Love ko
with
to.
you. and you're known for that, and that becomes your equity. So that means from recognition to the idea that people understand what you stand for.
Yeah.
So the logo is just one element of that.
Yeah.
So the real value of branding, that over time you cultivate a certain kind of promise.
Yeah.
You occupy a certain space in the minds of the people,
Yeah.
because you're going to be competing with a lot of other brands out there.
Yeah.
So if people can only choose 3 options amongst the 10, will you be the top of mind brand?
Right.
So that's everything that we do. The visible part is the tip of the iceberg. The value really is the non-exposed side, like the strategy development, the point of differentiation, the idea of really looking inwards about your values and what define you before you project that into the world. And then if you're consistent in that projection and delivering on your promise, that becomes the powerful equity, which is your trust and loyalty that is associated with your brand.
Beautifully said. So, Rick, branding is not just about the intentional creation of what's seen and then aligning your company or your collective's values to that, right? Is it correct to assume that the proper process of branding is looking internally, but at the same time looking at where you want to be, being honest about it, and simply expressing and celebrating it?
Yes, that's why it's called brand identity.
Right? Yeah.
Because you have a chance to define your own identity. It's like, you know, you're not so sure when you're so young.
Yeah.
But you reach adolescence, you align yourself with like-minded people. You form friendships and alliances because there's something about them that mirrors the values that you have.
And
So,
who you want to be.
Yes.
The people you look up to.
The
Right?
aspiration. That,
Aspirations, the
like, for example,
dreams.
that's why we have dreams. I want to be an architect. I want to be a gymnast, Olympic gymnast. Because that's how you define your identity. You assign a value on these things that are really important, and you stick to that set of values. You allow those values to define you, and you allow those values to determine your actions, your point of view, and you use this value. This is very important for branding also. You use these values as a filtering device. Because it's easy to say no when you know it's not you.
Exactly.
So branding, the first step that we do in Design for Tomorrow is not to rush into designing the logo or prescribing this and that. We ask a central question like, who are you? What do you do? Why are you doing it? To what end? And why this really matters? And how do you do these things that makes you different from the others? Because that's how you differentiate yourself. And finally, you have to look inward and really identify, if this is not you yet, what is the aspiration that will get you there?
And I remember when we approached you to rebrand our company, Buensalido Architects, into Barchan Architecture, you didn't rush into any proposition, any solution, any suggestion. Your first kind of directive to us was to come up with a manifesto. That time we had our values all intact. We were intentional about the objectives and the mission, the purpose. But to condense it into a manifesto, we never did yet. And so that was your first challenge when we asked you to rebrand us. You gave us an assignment right away.
That manifesto is for us to look into the window of how you view the world. And the manifesto is a sort of a signature of intent. How do you see yourself? How do you view the world? What do you do that will bridge between you and the world? And that's very important because remember, going back to the principle of branding, not only do you need to be recognized, you also need to be understood. So if people do not understand your value, it's going to be such a very challenging exercise because you're projecting to the world who you are and why would people support you. And the support is going to happen if they understand what you stand for. So that's the importance why the first step in branding is not really to rush into the design or the outward manifestation, but looking inward and determining the things that cannot be challenged by anybody about you.
That's why we actually couldn't go right I remember we couldn't dive directly into that whole branding process, is because it took us a while.
Yes.
I mean, from our side, it took us a while to kind of conjure up that manifesto, because there was a lot of introspection that was
Yes.
required, a lot of muni,
Mhm.
if you may. But I remember distinctly when I sat down and wrote that manifesto, all of those things that I absorbed,
Mhm.
that we thought about, that we discussed with the partners and the team, all got condensed into a single night.
Mhm.
And then I was so happy that Rick, the next day I sent you an email. It's still a work in progress, but the core idea of our mission, our ideals, our purpose, our mission, and all of those things, it's all here in this working document. So we
Yes.
sent it over, and that's when kind of the jamming started. The real fun
Yes.
actually began.
And that's a very crucial phase, which we call the understanding phase.
Yeah,
Because how can you project yourself clearly if
Yeah.
you yourself is confused about who you
right.
are?
Yeah,
So, in our company, Design for Tomorrow, that is already a manifestation
Mhm.
why our first core value is
Yeah.
called clarity.
there you go.
We bring clarity into the intention of this particular brand, and when it's very clear to us who you are, what you do, and
Yeah.
at what end and,
Yeah.
and what purpose this is done for, then we can express it in such a very clear and engaging
Yeah.
manner.
I'm assuming you also have other values aside from clarity.
Yes,
Maybe you
we
can
are
expound a little
defined
more.
by 3 core values.
Right.
Clarity. It needs to be clear to us, to you, your
Okay.
target audiences, and even their competitors, who
Okay.
you are and what you stand for. The second value is what we call creativity,
Okay.
because this is where we differentiate. How creative can
Yeah.
we get in differentiating you? How can we express you in such a very compelling manner?
Yeah.
And creativity is sometimes the hotbed of innovation, because, like what we said, you're going to be competing with a lot of people.
Yeah.
How can we harness the power of creativity so that people will have a clear understanding
Yeah.
of who you are? And finally, this is very important for
Okay.
us, and it filters down to the way we hire our own colleagues.
Yeah.
It's called commerce.
Mm.
We always have to assess ourselves. There's a different path when you think in your mind or in your personal identity that you're an artist,
Yeah.
and if you are a commercial designer.
Yeah.
There's a gulf of difference there.
Yeah.
Because if people think that they're an artist, then it's going to be very vision driven. Sometimes that vision is not compromised, and it could be a very big challenge when
Yeah.
you're dealing with people who are outside your organization, especially clients.
Right.
You have a different view of the world. And if you have no way of making that clarity and creativity commercially viable,
Yeah.
it's gonna remain in your head because nobody supported it. So that's why we always believe that a brilliant idea
Uh-huh.
that remains in your head is not valid.
Right.
Nobody bought it. Nobody was moved to support it. Nobody rallied behind you because they believe strongly in what you stand for. Then it's just a brilliant idea that is useless because it's just there in
Yeah,
your head.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
never used by anybody. So that's why we look at commerce not as a point of a way to earn more businesses.
Yeah.
We look at commerce because we're beholden to the ambitions. We are beholden to the goals and objectives of our clients.
Yeah.
But also, it is a sort of an ego check.
Yeah.
We're not designing for ourselves. We're designing for others. If you're using other people's money
Yeah.
to do something, you have to have that kind of facility where you need to understand them so that you harness your creativity in getting to the goal
Yeah.
of this particular idea. So the commerce component of our value is a humbling kind of value that we try so hard to practice. Sometimes we fall short to that one because of certain circumstances, but we strive.
Before you said commerce, I was going to suggest cash. But commerce is a much more tasteful way
Yes.
to say it. You are really in branding indeed.
So that's why if you look
Yeah.
back to our discussion when you were thinking,
Yeah.
I remember it. I think it was a phone call, and you
Mhm.
said, I'm thinking about the long-term viability, and there are so many things that has shifted in our practice,
Right.
and I think we need to rebrand. So after
Yeah.
that manifesto was written, remember we had another session in this room.
Yeah.
You pulled in all the relevant
All of
voices
the
within
partners were here.
Barchan.
Yeah.
So it's going to be not just a mono vision, but it's a rich layerings of
Yeah.
different perspectives. So the other thing that we did after the manifesto is define the values that propel or motivate you, that sort
Yeah.
of inspire you.
Right.
When you started and where you are now, can you tell us what values have shifted or what values have remained consistent since the start to now, or what do you think will be the values that will keep on shifting?
Yeah, so I think the soul of the practice is still very much the same. There's still a deep desire to, number one, cause positive change through architecture and the built environment in the lives of those that we serve. Maybe it got a little bit bigger because from single families, it became communities. And then now we're very intentional about contributing to nation building. So we're seeking out more civic projects, more public projects that are not only limited in private enclaves, but more, accessible to anyone and everyone, right? So nation building and kind of celebrating our identity through the built environment is very much the same. There was a time that we were very specific about certain ideas and how it can be reflected as Filipino architecture. But we realized after, a lot of experiments and a lot of learnings and conversations with a lot of different people is that it would actually be a little bit futile to define something, especially in this ever-changing world. Because if you define something now, tomorrow, the world will be different. And if our basic belief is that architecture is simply a response to context, and if context today will be different from tomorrow, the way that you defined or responded to that context will probably be, again, different tomorrow. So the author of the book, Edson Cabalfin, actually said it beautifully. He said that Filipino or Philippine architecture is about being and becoming. And that actually struck me because there's no attempt in that phrase to define, but there's a celebration of discovery, of being true to yourself, and really in an authentic way, responding to what's the cards that are dealt to you. So in that sense, the soul remains the same, but the attitude of being more open, being more responsive, being more adaptive, is there. I think it's brought about by some wisdom that we've gathered over the years.
Yes, and I remember in one of our discussions in the past to us when it was anchored on what the designer Karim Rashid said about exploration of identity and design when he said that I am half Canadian, half Egyptian. My practice is based in New York. I have a client in Italy that prototypes in Germany that is being sold in Asia. So which country owns my design?
Exactly. Yeah.
So and that was the idea of the nomadic identity that the creativity cannot be just corralled in a specific location because, and I think it was so richly highlighted by our national hero Jose Rizal. He said in one of his famous writings that genius has no country, diverse everywhere.
And if you think about it, I mean, Filipinos, we are citizens of the world, and so is every other country, right?
I mean,
because the internet is there, we get to travel left and right, so the world is actually getting smaller, and therefore we are shaped by ideas from the other side of the continent, right? So it's futile to deflect these ideas from coming into our brains, into our persona. It's all about embracing the variety of the world and making sure that while we embrace it, we keep intact our origins and our identity.
Because the challenge whenever I meet architects is that when discussion about identity will come in, and sometimes it delves deeper into this idea of cultural protectionism that can happen. I'm very fascinated by this kind of discussions because the challenge that I always ask is, if I uproot one piece of your architecture and put it in Singapore, will it be valid there?
Right. Yeah.
if I uproot this piece of design and suddenly transport it to Cambodia,
Yeah.
will it help redefine the context of that place, or that could be a manifestation of a renewed sense of aspiration like what they're doing in Dubai? Because if you look at Dubai many decades ago and you tell people Dubai or the UAE could be a luxury destination, people will laugh at you.
Yeah.
But they were so intentional. They purposely designed the Burj Al Arab, the Burj Khalifa, and now you look at Dubai differently
Yeah.
because they use design and creativity in intentionally
Yeah.
trying to shift the perspectives of people. And that's also a major role that branding does, the changing of perspectives, the cultivation of a certain kind of idea, project it to the world, and that idea is viable.
That's where dreaming will come into play. That's where intentionality will come into play.
So that's
right?
why we love the idea when you mentioned about being fluid, always shifting depending on the context, which leads us into the naming exercise. So and we, after so many discussion of what's important about Barchan, I remember it very well that you said, I'm conflicted because on the one hand, Buensalido Architects has established a very strong brand equity and recognition. So how do we...
you asked me why.
And
why rebrand?
And what elements should we retain? So we picked the word Barchan because it's meaningful in so many ways. B+A is still there, which is with the DNA. Architecture is in the heart of the word. And then the suffix is an, which is really an article that precedes what it's defined. So it's really meaningful because when you say Barchan, it checks all the boxes of the new vision that the context can shift the way a Barchan happens in the desert when the formation of the sand, whether it's the wind or the sunlight or whatever external factor that affects the shifting of the form. That's how you view the practice now. And also, can you just rephrase what strike me to be very important is that it is now the merging of so many voices and it's not just one name in the front door.
It's so funny that you speak about Barchan as a name and the way that you broke it down into I think 3 segments, if I'm not mistaken. But I remember the first time that I approached you about rebranding, you said, into what name? And so that was another assignment that you gave me, right? That was really nerve-wracking. But the process, I remember, was that you're right in saying that we got to be known as B+A over time. Buensalido Architects became B+A. And so when I was searching for a name, I was looking for a B, and then I stumbled upon this word called Barchan. And I haven't met anyone until now, since we rebranded, that knows or that knew the meaning of Barchan, and me included, right? So I searched, what is Barchan? Barchan, I found out, was this crescent-shaped sand dune, typically found in deserts, that's obviously shaped by the wind. And then I said, wow, how appropriate is this? Because our belief with the kind of architecture that we do is that architecture is simply shaped not by wind, but by context. Right? So it's simply a response to the context, whether that's the basic context of, let's say, climate, user, functionality, or even if it's like a complex component of context, like, analysis of the target market of a particular product, whatever it is, it's simply a response, right? And so I pitched it to you over the phone again. What do you think of this? And they said, it's on point. And then the breaking it apart into 3 components actually came after, but it wasn't too forced because everything just kind of fell into the place from the discovery of Barchan into Barchan being B+A at the same time containing Arc, which is architecture, and then An, right? So it was like a natural evolution from a series of discoveries. So,
because that's the purpose of people do not have an idea how difficult brand naming is, because the first layer of brand naming actually is it should be able to express everything that you would want to express
Yeah.
in a way. It could
Yeah.
be abstract, it could be referential, but the beauty of this particular naming exercise is it becomes adaptable and malleable enough to fully echo what you're doing in
Yeah.
terms of your design philosophy. The second problem of brand naming is ownability.
Right.
And this is where a lot of people come to us with a list of names that are not viable. Because
Yeah.
number one, you cannot trademark it.
Yeah.
Number two, if you did, I have a client who did something with another agency. The minute they slapped the logo in front of the hotel, they got sued because
Right,
somebody else used the
Yeah.
name. If you're presenting a name that is not overly familiar to a lot of
Yeah.
people, you have now the duty to make it recognizable and
Yeah.
understood, and you have to do a lot of effort educating people what this name stands
Yeah.
for. So that's, to me, is a good opportunity, but also very challenging. Good opportunity because you're presenting an exotic name
Yeah.
that doesn't sound like everybody else,
Yeah.
and you stand out.
Yeah.
But also the flip side is you have to make a lot of effort what
Yeah.
the name stands for.
One of the issues that you brought up as a response to that initial suggestion was, you'll have a problem with people pronouncing it.
Yes.
Right? So I'd like to officially teach everybody that it's not Barchan, it's Barchan.
Yes, because that's the point of another layer of the challenge of brand naming. Not only will you pick a name, but the facility,
Yeah.
the homonymous implication of this, because certain words sounds babantot.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have also to pick a name that doesn't sound negative in
Yeah.
another culture, especially if one of the goals of Barchan, for example, is to diversify beyond the borders of the
Yes,
Philippines.
yes,
So
yes,
it has to not have negative connotation, and also the facility of people being able to pronounce it correctly,
Yeah.
because that's where memorability
Yeah.
is gonna be very important as well for brands.
Yeah, that's a very important point. Why we rebranded, right? Of course, one of the reasons is that we want to practice outside of the Philippines. I mean, being an ASEAN architect,
Mm.
we can actually practice in other ASEAN countries. So that's kind of in preparation and in position
Mm.
to that possible future. But some of the other reasons was that, number one, whenever people talk to me, particularly about our designs, they ask me how much of it is mine. And my standard response would always be, I almost don't know how much is mine, how much is theirs,
Mhm.
because all of our designs, all of the buildings, all of the projects that we handle are all products of collaboration. So whether you're the oldest or the most seasoned in the team or the newest, if you have an idea, then we put it on the table and then we combine everything to come up, hopefully, with something that addresses the problem at hand, right? So it's a celebration of collaboration. But then if you look at our old brand, there's only one last name
Right.
on the wall, right? And so I wanted to detach that, come up with a new identity with the absence of any name, so that it's a recognition that all of our ideas are products of collaboration. So that's first. Second is that, of course, when I started the firm, it was just, basically me leading it. But over time, some of the employees that have joined us, the badasses that have joined us over time, are now partners. So later we'll introduce them. But like, for example, Ems, who was the very first employee, is now a partner, and she's our vice president for operations. My wife, Nikki, is vice president for admin, HR, business dev. Jerome, who is our associate architect for design, and Cholo, our associate architect for culture. All of them are now partners. So again, it's a recognition that it's a collective. We're being led by a collective and not by a single person, right? The third is, no matter who it is at the helm of our practice, whether it's me or in the future, it could be somebody else, the mission will move on. The mission will stay. And whoever it is in the collective, they will continue to pursue that mission.
So you have to ensure that it's always the succession planning away to keep the
Right.
flame of the Barchan creativity alive,
Yeah.
regardless of who is on the helm.
Yeah. And I think lastly, I mean, of course, when we're young, we're very idealistic, we're very aggressive, we're very loud, right? And that comes with youth, right? And I think the last reason is that we want to signify to the world that, we've matured a little bit, maybe. We've learned from a lot of our mistakes. Maybe we've gathered some wisdom, a lot of white hair, but maybe some wisdom. And we've realized that architecture really at the core and at the heart of it is about problem solving, right? If your designs are loud, are flashy, are too showy, but it doesn't address the root of the problem, then it's not relevant, right? So we've learned it over time from maturity and mistakes. And we want to signify that also by this kind of new identity.
But precisely, people come to you for a certain degree of boldness because as the world gets more homogeneous by the minute, because everybody is too afraid to challenge just about anything or anybody nowadays, wouldn't that be taking away from what made you great in the first place?
There's a difference, in my opinion, between becoming too aggressive to the point of being too showy for the sake of it, for the sake of attention, for example, versus showing courage for the purpose of hoping to discover something new so that that new discovery can actually address the problem in a new way. I think there's a difference. And so by us retaining the color that we had from B+A, from Buensalido Architects, fuchsia, or pink, because I can't spell fuchsia, we retain that because it kind of communicates courage. I mean, ever since we donned fuchsia as the company color in 2010, if I'm not mistaken, I can't recall any other architectural firm that has tried on the same shade. And somebody was telling me that, hey, it took a lot of guts and courage for you to take on fuchsia when typically, especially at that time, most architectural firms were black, were green,
Navy
were
blue.
red, were blue, right? And none were fuchsia.
Yes.
Until this day, in my mind at least, I can't think of anyone.
And see, that's the point of branding, because you need to differentiate in the world of navy blues and somebody with a fuchsia color, for example, or magenta. It immediately makes people straighten up and say, okay, we're seeing something new. And it's not just the newness. It also belies the courageous element of the practice. So again, the choice of the elements reflect what are the things that are important to you.
I mean, courage is definitely one of the top values that we have because, I mean, the practice is really based, number one, on curiosity, which now propels us to experiment and question and inquire. And in the process of experimentation leads us to discovery of new things, of new ways of doing things, of new ways of doing architecture that then, creates new kinds of spaces.
I'll put you a little bit on the spot here because you mentioned about the brand and the practice maturing, but at the same time evolving a little bit. How, in the face of this maturity and new direction of being a little bit not so loud, for example, how do you prevent creative stagnation? Would you think that could be counterproductive to your practice as well if you veer too much into the quieter, more mature side and lose the vitality that defines the courage of the practice early on?
Again, I don't think it's about losing that, vitality, losing that spirit. I would answer you maybe in 2 C's. Clarity, inspired by DFT. The other one is culture.
Because you're working with young people as well.
I mean, we're a collective, right? So, starting with clarity, we have to be clear about our mission, our dreams, our hopes, our aspirations for the collective. We also have to be clear in communicating it to the team. Sometimes I get too repetitive, and that's intentional. because that basic psychology trick wherein you keep on repeating things and then eventually you'll remember it
Mhm.
or eventually you'll believe it.
Branding
right?
works the same way.
Branding works the
Constant
same way.
exposure to it breeds
Yeah.
familiarity and recognition.
So, in the thick of things, when you try to think of an idea, hopefully they don't hear my voice, right? But being clear about your mission and your purpose is one, right? Second is culture, right? Of course, that culture of experimentation, of being curious, we express it or implement it in different ways. Like, for example, we have Free Fridays, wherein we allow ourselves to do things outside of the office. A lot of times it's related to architecture, but sometimes not. But all the times we have something new to learn from the experience, which we can hopefully bring back to the table and infuse a new kind of dimension to our design process. This podcast, for example, is part of culture, wherein we grow because we have the desire to learn, right? And whenever we have guests like you, for example, we learn a lot from the whole process, from this whole conversation, because it's in these conversations, it's in these exchange of ideas that we learn, and then that learning we share. Before, we only shared amongst us, but now we want to share our learning to the rest of the world. And that's one of the reasons why this podcast exists. So, clarity and culture, I think.
And I remember it when we were designing, we picked the name, the color. We had a discussion to retain the color, which makes you very distinctive.
Yeah.
And then we had one solution, one presented, and it was approved on the spot.
On the spot.
Which rarely happens. Is it because, do you think that it was the kind of design solution that really encapsulates what you wanted to do, or do you think that the importance of familiarity between collaborators can also breed that instant recognition on why certain things work and why certain things do not work?
It's yes to both, but I think what trumps both is trust. So when we started this conversation, we revisited how we met. So that was 2007. You didn't even run a branding agency at that time. And we were just trying to establish ourselves, right? And so what I'm trying to say is that we saw each other's journey from the time we were dreaming, even before when we were starting. Well, even before we started, I mean, till now, right? We saw the inception. And then throughout that journey, we even had a lot of collaborations through projects, through spaces that we designed and then you branded. In 2014, you actually even designed our first book. So, in other words, yes, the familiarity is there, but more so the trust. So we trusted you, that you knew exactly what we wanted to say, how, the message that we wanted to bring out, and kind of the design direction that that resonated with us. So that when you designed the book, which is this, the first time you showed it to us, approved right away because you caught it. Right. So
yes, it's really fascinating. If you look at this book, there are so many projects there that, well, visually they're very arresting.
Yeah.
But if you care to dive into the creation of those design, the insights and the wisdom and the strategies that you employed, it's really very richly layered.
Yeah. So you designed this book. DFT designed this book in 2014. And I remember,
also Marlon, our associate creative director at the time, had to really work for 3 days getting the grid right, because this was based in your initial identity that Russell of Graphics did about the triangular, the festive Filipino spirit, and he has to design every letter based on that triangle, and it took him forever. And there was a time, and I was peering behind him working on the computer. Oh, come on with this already. But the idea, you mentioned the idea of trust, but also I think it's having that kind of collaboration where you are partly inculturated into the mindset of your creative partners, that you don't really are plucking things from the ether, for example.
Yeah,
it
yeah.
you have a window of how they operate, their mindset, the values that are important to them, and that sort of facilitates the design process, because that kind of keen understanding, you're not rooting your work on guesswork.
So speaking about the book, so this was the first book that we published and then that you designed, and this is the new book. So the story of this book, by the way, was that we wanted to publish a book that contained a lot of our ideas that weren't built during that time, right? So a lot of new ideas, a lot of innovations that a lot of the clients that we would be speaking with didn't believe. So we said, why don't we make it into a book? A lot of conceptual ideas, launch it in CCP. And then, true enough, that actually, we became more believable because we launched it in CCP, for example. And then over the years, we had an enjoyable practice. 10 years later, right, 2014. So 2024, most of these, the conceptual ideas in this book are now built. And then to add to that, just like how we keep on evolving, we have new conceptual ideas. So it's now in the form of this book. So 2 questions in relation to that. How different was your approach in designing this book versus this book? And maybe you can take us through the process that you went through as well.
Well, look at it. If you compare the visibility, the most visible thing is the format. Great ideas, small format. Greater ideas, bigger format. It also is visually a reflection of not just the changes, but the evolution of the practice.
Yeah.
So, we love the idea because, number one, I'm a firm believer of print. I feel still that everything that is valid should be committed to print.
Yeah.
Because we're awash with digital content that sooner or later we might forget. But every
It's
time
tangible, right?
yeah,
You can
it's
touch
tangible.
it.
You put it on top
Feel the
of
wind.
your coffee table in your house, and your guests will look at it and say, "Oh my God, you're such a very design savvy, very cultured person." Because again, the brand reflects that. So you are what you read, right? Or at least your aspiration is to be associated by the contents of this book. So the really big challenge for us, aside from the format and aside from the production values, so right from the get-go, we knew that we don't want this to be ignored in a very crowded bookstore, for example. So there are little elements like the iridescent production values. We put a cap stitch binding because everything is so sleek, and we would like to introduce the idea of craft. A little bit.
Yeah, you want to express how
and
it
also
was
the
made,
element
right?
of surprise. Of course, the color is there.
Speaking of production, you said, Jason, we're not gonna print here.
Yes,
We're gonna print
in Hong Kong. So it was another portal to a lot of sufferings.
Yeah, worth it in the end, right?
Which we will detail later on. But
yeah.
the really great challenge is Barchan is not short on creativity and ideas. So the real challenge is not the ill supply of it, but so much supply that it's difficult to edit, which goes into the book.
Yeah.
Because editing is an important skill.
Right.
Because it determines how much value you put on certain things and lesser value to the other things. But also, it's an important exercise because what you leave out is equally important than what you highlight.
Yeah.
So when we were having this conversation about making it into a proper monograph, we're not simply looking at it as a book. Like what I mentioned earlier, it is a portal on what is possible.
Yeah.
And we wanted this anchoring on, remember, our commerce kind of culture, because part of the goal is the diversification of Barchan into different territories.
Yes.
So we immediately thought of the book as Barchan's calling
It's
card
calling
to the world.
card that you can hand out. Yeah.
So it's something that before they actually meet the principals,
Yeah.
they might find it in a bookstore and
Yeah.
they will see the ideas and the creativity, and who would know? Somebody is just gonna call you from out of nowhere and
Yeah.
say, I got your book and maybe we can talk about this.
And true enough, right? When we were in Hong Kong together attending that Monocle Chiefs conference, there were a lot of developers from
Yes.
Bangkok,
Yes.
Vietnam, and then that time was
Yes.
also the time we picked up the book.
Yes.
We actually saw it for the first time in print, and then we were able to hand it out like a calling
And
card.
you see
Just
the
like-
reaction.
yeah,
They were
yeah.
immediately impressed.
Yeah, they took.
You know?
Oh,
In a way, it is a patriotic kind of spirit
yeah,
that you elevate the talents of the Philippines
Mhm.
and bring it to the wider world.
Yeah.
And that is possible by this book
Yeah.
because we are also awash by a lot of Instagram feeds and even a lot of design blogs.
Yeah.
And for me, this is a key tactile differentiator that celebrates everything that is possible
Yeah.
in terms of the practice of Barchan.
But what were some of the challenges, Rick, that you personally went through when we gave you the challenge of designing the book? Because obviously the first one was writing the book, and we went through an arduous process with Edson over the span of almost a year.
Yes.
When we had to meet over Zoom because he's based in the States.
States.
9 in the evening here was 9 in the morning there. So 9 o'clock was our usual meeting time. And we would take him through all of the projects, not all, but a lot of the project. And we would present it to him for the first time so that he can absorb kind of the breadth and the variety of our mental models.
So
So it was hard. So 1 year of presenting to him, 1 year almost of him writing it, and then maybe another year of you designing it. So what were the
we're
challenges?
doing the parallel. So aside from the editing, it's
Yeah.
more like how do you make the rich content not clash with each other?
Uh-huh.
The idea of compartmentalizing and creating connective threads between the projects. So it's not just going to be an egotistical portfolio. It has to express a certain kind of or echo a certain kind of value in the practice of Barchan. That's why I love that it became also the signposting device, that the value became the signposting device. You have specific projects that talk about the value of altruism, for example, innovation, the Filipino spirit, the idea of community building,
advancement,
so
progress.
the challenge, this advancement and progress, the challenge is how do you reshuffle the rich content, make it cohesive, make it like each project has an opportunity to shine, but they also feel a larger role in the kind of the manifestation of the values that are sacred to you. The second one as well is, of course, design.
The actual designing of the
Designing of it,
graphic
because it has to
design.
be on brand. So we employ the colors, we employ the typography that we used in the branding.
You had visual cues,
Yes.
like you have layerings and hierarchical systems of font sizes and
Yes.
font types, right?
So those are the nitty gritty, and our one of the crucial element in editorial design is the grid system, because it is a device that we use as a discipline, but also we would know when to break it to make it very dynamic as well.
Actually, that's a good point, Rick, is because when we build structures, all of our drawings, if you look at the blueprints, you'll always see that grid system. Let's say A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, and then all of a sudden, there's a breakaway grid.
Yes.
But it's still in relation to that major grid.
Yes.
So
The mastery of the discipline,
yeah.
then you would know how to break it if you master the discipline first.
Somebody told me that first you must master the rules before you can break it. I remember it was June De Leon, the photographer, who said, if you really want to make change, if you want to make progress and innovation, master the basics, master the rules, and then it will give you the confidence and the freedom to break it.
Well, at Design for Tomorrow, we have a less elegant way of putting it. We call it, first, make it perfect, then fuck it up a little. Because the fuck it
I
up
think
a
that's more
little gives it
eloquent.
a little bit of a spirit, you know? Because if everything is perfect, and I think we had one of those wine discussion where we talk about how we cope as creative people as well, is the idea that you can strive, but you cannot achieve perfection because we are
Never.
humans.
Yeah,
We're
never.
prone to a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
A lot of people are so obsessed about perfection that is unachievable
Yeah.
until I read the book that says, do not aim for perfection,
No.
but strive for excellence.
Yeah, that's actually one of the learnings that we personally stumbled upon over the span of 18 years of practice is that, perfection is impossible, right? So why impose it on yourself? Why impose it on projects? And so in the last part of the book, as a conclusion, one of the learnings is that we need to strive for progressive excellence.
Yes.
So excellence
Possible,
over
right?
possible, right? Do your best in every single opportunity, and incremental improvement, 1% improvement over a long period of time is also possible.
Yes.
Right?
And then this is where the mindset of the Japanese has been widely
yeah.
copied and repurposed and reinvented, the idea of celebrating even the little mistakes in the wabi-sabi culture, because if we all strive for that impossible perfection, we're gonna get bitter and frustrated. But incremental changes, little things that has the opportunity to improve, is a much more viable path moving forward for humanity, I think. And the other challenge also is we were computing the production budget for the book, and the insistence of why print it in Hong Kong, why not it here, and then painfully enough we discovered the very challenging world of logistics, of customs.
Again, everything is about learning new things, right? And so now
there were
we know how
times
to
when
handle it.
we wanted to pull our hair off and say, why do we do this to ourselves? Why can't we make it easy? But I think now that we're looking at the result, it's very rewarding as well.
Yeah, it's very fulfilling. I mean, now that it's in our hands.
But what it's very easy to say no to the idea that in a really digital world, a friend of yours will say, Jason, let's do a book. What compelled you to agree to this kind of insanity?
Well, number one, trust, right? Because you were the one who really pushed me to go print, because you're a firm believer of print, as you mentioned. But the other side of it is that we do the same thing in architecture, wherein we imagine possibilities. We imagine things in our minds, designs, ideas, and so on. But it doesn't stop there. It's about bringing all of these non-tangible things into the tangible world. So I believe in exactly the same thing in architecture. So when you brought up that idea, we were all systems go. Yeah.
I just feel like print is gonna be an important differentiator also, because a lot of your competitors, for example, are mastering digital, getting digital savvy. But to commit something, to have something very tangible, could be an opportunity to differentiate as well. And also the idea that it becomes the more tangible expression to relaunch the practice from B+A to Barchan.
So I think that's a perfect way to kind of conclude and wrap up. Maybe I'd like to ask you, Rick, what's next for DFT, and what are some of the things that you're excited about for Design for Tomorrow?
Well, we learned belatedly that even the most carefully constructed plan can go haywire at the last minute. So we somehow learned a little bit from your practice about being fluid, being malleable, to continue evolving our practice and shift a little bit. Because I mentioned earlier that everybody is now a branding expert. So what else do we bring into the mix? So that's why for us, it's equally important that narrative is going to be one of the central focus of our evolution as well.
Ooh.
People...
Do I sense a book? Also?
There will be one coming out. But also, we love the idea that we see all this beautiful design every day. But it's really the story that moves our
Yeah,
hearts.
it's always about the stories.
It's
right?
always the
The
story.
stories behind people, the stories behind brands,
Mhm.
the stories behind buildings.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So,
So, the story is what compels people to
Uh-huh.
rally behind you.
Yeah.
Because if they feel the story that you're telling, it becomes a powerful tool
Yeah.
because it's an emotional tool.
Yeah.
People think that we are logical, but we are not.
Yeah.
Because why would you buy explain to me the
Yeah.
concept of driving a Lamborghini in
Mm.
EDSA and get stuck for 3 hours? Because that's not a functional
Yeah,
one. If you
yeah.
want a functional one, you'll probably get a Nissan Prius with
Yeah.
greener credentials.
Yeah.
But you're not really
Or a
buying that
motorcycle,
car for the
right?
function, right?
Yeah.
You're buying that because of how it makes you feel.
Right.
And the story behind it is
Yeah.
important to you. And you look at it, and it's really the idea that when you're stuck in the traffic for 3 hours, all the necks are craning and figure out who is driving that particular
Yeah,
car.
yeah.
And so part of that proposition is you command the admiration and respect of
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
And that's why I find it funny that one of these really amazing contemporary philosophers said that if you see a guy driving a Ferrari, do not hate him.
Uh-huh.
Hug him. Because he needs all the love he can get.
And
and that's the kind of story
Yeah,
that fascinate us from for the last few
Yeah.
years, and finding out what kind of story really resonates.
Yeah. Speaking of stories, I hope
Yeah.
everybody can also read our story, our transition from Buensalido Architects to Barchan. And at least personally, what I'm excited about is where this book, this new kind of identity, this new collective will bring us, what our story will evolve to.
Yes.
So yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
and then the branding and the evolution plus the tangible manifestation of the evolution in the book. Maybe we should punctuate this conversation by asking you, what are you most hopeful about?
wow, what a loaded question. I'm hopeful about a lot of things, right? But in relation, at least to the practice, I'm hopeful for the new partners or the old partners now introduced newly through the rebranding and through the book. And I'm hopeful for maybe a nation that celebrates who we are through the built environment. The built environment that celebrates all of our frustrations, our challenges, but at the same time, all of our hopes, dreams, and aspirations, so that the next generation may be inspired to continue that story, right? And even to the point that millennia from now, people who will live at that time will through the lens of the architecture that we will produce now, understand our current disposition as Filipinos. So that's
Yes.
what I'm hoping for.
And it took the courageous Barkan team to not only imagine what's possible, but gives a precedence for people to be more courageous.
And you know what? More than anything, I'm really hopeful that architecture, people will see the value of architecture as something that improves lives, that uplifts lives, and is an enabler of people to connect, for communities to form, and for culture to thrive.
Very well said.
That's
Thank
it.
you.
Again, we have Architect Jason, Architect Nikki with us. We have the partners of Barchan. So,
This is Barchan Architecture. These are the partners that make up the collaborative, the collective that is Barchan Architecture. So if in case you didn't know, I actually founded the firm before it was Barchan Architecture in 2006, right? And the very first hire that we had was actually Ems right here. And right now she's our vice president for operations. She basically takes care of the day-to-day, operations of the whole office, right? And she has that strength of being able to connect one particular situation to a larger scale, kind of mindset, or one particular situation to the next or to the previous one. So she has a very strong kind of sequential, logical thinking, and that we thought that it was appropriate for her to have that particular position.
Yeah.
Around that time, actually, I was already courting
Right?
right? Nikki right here. And so around that exact time was when I founded the firm. So even if she did work somewhere else from '06 all the way till 2010, she was kind of indirectly working with us in the same way that I was indirectly being mentored by her mentor as well. And right now, she's our vice president for HR, for admin, for business dev, for finance, basically everything else. She's the rock, right, of the firm. She's mostly behind the scenes, but without her foundation, of course, everything that we have around us would essentially crumble. In 2010, Jerome and Cholo joined. Cholo, right here, is very good with people, right? And he's also very empathetic. He's very sensitive in terms of trying to understand where the other person is coming from, and he has a special gift to bring people together. Right? And because of that, aside of course from leading his own team, he is now our associate architect for culture. So all of the soft skills, the other activities aside from architecture that we all enjoy in the office, right? The culture of the office is led by Cholo. So you have your free Fridays, you have
Babble Station.
Babble Station. We also have I think it's going to be our first firm soiree, our inter-firm interaction with another group that's not necessarily an architectural firm so that we can learn. So that's Cholo, our culture vulture, as Jerome put it. Speaking of Jerome right here actually has that internal strength, that mental strength, that emotional strength to kind of guard the integrity of the design concept from the start and bring it all the way to the end until implementation. All projects are not necessarily built as initially conceived, but if you kind of guarded the project from the realities of this world to preserve its concept, then I think we would have done the job. And I think Jerome is that's one of his strengths. And so that's why now he's actually the associate architect for design. So with that, basically, this is Barchan Architecture.
You mentioned, sir, na this was already in the works way back pa 2019.
Yeah, actually, that was around the perfect time because 2019 was when we kind of formalized on paper Barchan as a corporation. And then that time we were really already planning to launch 2020 maybe, 2021. But like what Nikki shared a while ago, the pandemic happened, which to me was good, even better, because that gave us time to really focus on the creation of the book, and it gave us time to complete some of the other projects that were in process that time. And even the way that we ended the book, right? Because of that extension, if you remember the book, we ended with the Pangasinan Barangay Centers. That time was when it won the WAF-X. And so the last part of Edson's job was to actually edit the copy of the book because when we wrote about Pangasinan Barangay Center in the book, it didn't already win. In the process of designing the book and in the process of writing the book, he had to edit it in the last minute just to include that story.
So one of the things I was curious about is, what did that parang conversation sound like na we're actually gonna change it up na we're not gonna be Buensalido Architects, it's gonna be Barchan.
Actually, parang the conversation started with Sir Jason parang telling us that he wanted to veer away from the name Buensalido and attaching it to the firm.
Yeah.
Parang that's how it started. Tapos that's the main goal of Barchan is so that to highlight the collective. And then from there, all of the formalities naman kasi parang minor na lang. What's important to us, the core was on board. Diba? Pag move forward kami together sa collective, having that collective identity in place. So doon na nag-start yun, the rebranding and all. Yeah.
Was there no like, oh, wait lang sir pag-usapan ulit natin na separate meeting, parang ang aga for a Monday, tas eto na agad. Wala bang parang, wait lang.
Oh yeah, we met it over the course of a lot of
Oh.
meetings. We discussed it
Syempre,
over the course of a lot of.
yeah, the paperwork, hindi naman kami masyadong professional about the paperwork. We had to study, we had to check everything about the papers that was being presented in front of us. Pero sabi ko nga parang formality na lang lahat yun eh. It was important to us. Everyone was game. Diba? Everyone was on board with the vision of the company and how we wanted to proceed over the next, at least mid to long term. No? That was the conversation.
Actually ako, hindi ko masyadong maalala kasi yun nga, puro back-end yung nangyayari at that time.
Yeah.
Cause parang wala yung conversation na are you on board? Are you having second thoughts? Walang ganun. So we were working on projects while on the side we're fixing the paperwork.
I think because nga 2019, it also slowly progressed over time. Like how we grew the office organically, it also organically flowed that this is how it was going to be. This is you're good at this. This is your strength. Are you okay to stay to lead this particular part of the corporation? So we had to talk about that. We had a lot of internal discussion about where you wanted to serve, where you wanted to be positioned at, and who you see yourself as in the future.
Just like how we are with you guys. Na,
Yeah.
if we find a strength na napapakita nyo sa office, we'll approach you. Are you interested in this? Doing this for the office, yung mga ganun. So that happened to us also.
Yeah.
Hindi siya bagsakan. Yeah.
Actually, you know what? There was one conversation I remember having with Sir Jason. Parang when he introduced that idea or that structure to us, he was saying parang instead of looking for outside people to lead the corporation, parang we wanted to give it to the hands of the people that really care about the firm. Parang yun, that resonated with me. Okay, sige. So I'm valued in this firm. And so ganun din. I'm gonna try to give my best to further this next endeavor that we're trying to do.
What inspired you to have like a green light na let's rebrand the office?
Well, going back to what Jerome said a while ago, is that the way that we operate, and you guys know this, is that none of our designs are just by one person. Never, right? Even if a design idea is already strong, drawn up or conceptualized by one person, that same concept is put on the table and is discussed not just among the team, but sometimes firm-wide, right? There's a series of crits that happen. So therefore, that design becomes a combination of a lot of ideas from different people. So collaboration is core to the way that we operate in the office. But looking at the identity of the office, there's only one last name, right? So it was kind of unfair and inconsistent to that idea of collaboration. So we wanted to really detach any name from the collective and represent the collective as an idea. So that's why from Buensalido Architects, we shifted now to Barchan Architecture. So it was really to recognize and celebrate collaboration.
It's actually quite a common practice na yung last name tapos architects.
Yeah.
Even
yes.
like big firms, di ba?
Associates, architects.
Associate
Yes.
architects, so Hadid,
Yeah.
York, laging isang person yung nag-represent. So it's actually quite cool na collective tayo. Like we're setting ourselves apart from that parang common practice.
Yeah.
Pero this question is actually parang the most obvious question is what happens to Buensalido Architects?
Yeah, Buensalido Architects basically will be parked for now because it's now Barchan Architecture. It is an entity. Anyway, it's an entity anyway. So we don't know. I mean, just like everything that we do, things surround us in the office and in every object, in every activity, it can evolve into something in the future. So right now, we're open to possibilities about what Buensalido Architects will be.
Okay, so fast forward to 2024 or right now. So you guys are leading the new era. And I wanted to ask, personally, sa inyo, what does this change mean to you guys?
For me personally, what this collective, this new partnership means is that anything is possible, right? We always say that what we do for our clients and for the people that we serve is that we always imagine possibilities for them for the purpose of improving life, for the purpose of bringing positive change to their lives, to their communities, to the nation, and so on. So I'm excited for new possibilities, whatever it is. We don't know, and that's kind of always how we start a design challenge. Is okay, we understand the problems, we understand the context, we understand the limitations, the strengths of our situation, but it's always up to us to make what's possible real. And that's what I think this group can do. I'm excited for that.
Same.
On point.
I think one of the good thing that I appreciate with the rebrand is the fact that Sir Jason was even the one who offered the rebranding. It's not just him who works for the company, but it's collective. In fact, it's not just even us. Even you guys are part of Barchan.
I'm gonna age myself here. Because
18 years later now.
this launch coincides with a milestone year for me and for you.
Yes.
Yes. Di ba lagi nilang sinasabi, life begins at a certain age.
At a certain
Ay,
age.
anong age
Yeah,
yan?
life begins at a certain age. Pero, come to think of it, hindi siya, kanina nabanggit yung isang bagsakan, hindi siya nangyayari ng ganun. It comes in different levels of introspection, different iterations of introspection about yourself and about your peers, your family members, how you work. So, I'm looking forward kung ano pa yung mga mangyayari over time.
Yeah, so exactly what Cholo said kanina. No? So, the rebranding of Barchan, it really signifies our desire just to really champion collaboration more than anything else, right? Kasi that's what it means. By highlighting the collective, it means that we're really open to that, to different possibilities. Diba? So we're not resting on our laurels. We're challenging ourselves every day. We're learning from different people. Diba? So that's what we wanted to highlight talaga with this rebranding. But to me personally, nothing changes. We carry on the mission. As mentioned, it's really about highlighting the people, highlighting who we serve for, highlighting who the people is behind the scenes that really form Barchan. So, yeah.
What we started in our 20s is something very different now, but it's very meaningful because it's a lifetime of work and it's a lifetime of transformation, spreading of positive change, whatever that may mean. Decades later, whoever lives we touch decades later and whoever lives we will join us in the coming years. So it's still evolving. Like the book says, it's still shifting sands. It's still a random response over time. And who we are is who we are right now. But of course, it can change. It will change in the future. And that's something that is always going to be constant.
I think the perfect phrase for everything that they have said in regards to rebranding is same but different. But
Oh, yeah. Same.
I like that.
yeah, I think everything that they have said was still rooted in the same principles and our ideals, and I think this signifies a new era, and I'm excited to what's in store for the future.
Like you put it, same, but
Yeah,
Different.
same but different, but evolving.
But evolving.
There you go.
Hope you enjoy this special episode, and please stay tuned for the next coming episodes on our social media platforms, which is
So you can find us on Facebook at Babble and Instagram at Babble with us. You can listen to us at YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.
see you guys in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.